Dinner was supposed to be simple. A quiet evening, a few jokes shared over baked salmon and roasted vegetables, the kind of routine we fell into without much thought. The kids were laughing about something on their phones, their giggles bubbling up like champagne, while I poured myself another glass of wine. My husband, David, was unusually quiet, his fork idling over his plate. At first, I thought he was just tired. Work had been brutal for him lately, or so he'd said. But then his phone buzzed. I wouldn't have noticed it if not for the way he stiffened. A quick glance at the screen, a swipe to dismiss the notification, and his hand moved back to his fork, pretending nothing had happened. But the way his jaw tightened, it was a small thing, but it wasn't nothing. I tried to brush it off. Maybe it was a work email. Maybe it was his boss being unreasonable again. Maybe it was. Another buzz. This time, he didn't swipe right away. His eyes darted to the kids, then to me, as if calculating whether anyone had noticed. I kept my gaze on my plate, playing the part of the oblivious wife. "Mom, can I have another roll?" my youngest asked, her voice slicing through the tension like a dull knife. "Of course, sweetie." I reached for the breadbasket, forcing my hands to stay steady. When I placed the basket down, my eyes caught the screen of David's phone. The message was still there, glowing faintly under the warm light of our dining room. I wasn't supposed to see it. I wasn't supposed to know. "Can't wait to feel you inside me again." My world didn't stop. Not exactly. The wine still swirled in my glass. The kids still laughed. The salmon still smelled faintly of dill. But something inside me cracked, sharp and jagged. I looked at him, really looked at him. The man who used to make me laugh so hard my stomach hurt. The man who held my hand when I was scared. The man who kissed my forehead every morning before work. And now, the man who couldn't even meet my eyes. "David," I said, my voice steady in a way that surprised me. "Is something wrong?" He glanced up, startled. "What? No, why?" "You seem distracted." "Just work," he said, offering me a weak smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You know how it is." I nodded, the lie slipping between us like oil on water. "Of course." I picked up my glass and took a slow sip, the wine burning down my throat. My mind raced, but my face betrayed nothing. There was a storm inside me, 1,000 questions fighting for space. Who was she? How long had this been going on? And the worst one, how did I not see this coming? The rest of dinner was a blur. I laughed at the right moments, nodded at the kids' stories, and kept my voice light. But beneath the surface, I was unraveling. Every word he said, every move he made, felt like part of some elaborate performance, a play I hadn't realized I was part of. When dinner was over and the kids went to their rooms, David started clearing the table. It was a small act, something he rarely did, and it felt almost comical in its obviousness. "You don't have to do that," I said, watching him gather plates. "I don't mind," he replied, avoiding my gaze. I wanted to scream, to throw a plate against the wall and demand answers. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I stood there, watching him like a stranger in my own home. And that's when I realized this wasn't just about the text. This wasn't just about another woman. This was about the crack in the foundation, the fault line running beneath the surface of our lives. I didn't say anything as he loaded the dishwasher. I didn't say anything as he kissed me on the cheek and went upstairs. I just stood there, the message burning in my memory. "Can't wait to feel you inside me again." The words echoed in my mind, cruel and vivid. And as I poured the rest of the wine into my glass, one thought consumed me. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I stayed in the kitchen long after David went upstairs, the sound of the dishwasher humming in the background. My glass of wine sat untouched now, the taste bitter in my mouth. I wanted to march up the stairs, throw the bedroom door open, and scream. I wanted to shove his phone in his face and demand answers. But something held me back. Maybe it was the kids. Maybe it was the fear of what I'd uncover. Or maybe it was the sinking realization that I wasn't ready for the truth. Not yet. Instead, I found myself replaying the evening in my head, every small detail now suspicious in hindsight. The way he hadn't touched his salmon, the quick glances at his phone, the nervous tapping of his fingers against the edge of his plate. How long had he been like this? Had I been blind, or had he simply gotten better at hiding it? I poured the wine down the sink. My hands trembled as I rinsed the glass, the cold water shocking against my skin. For the first time, the kitchen, my sanctuary, the place where I baked cookies with the kids and tried out new recipes, felt suffocating. I needed air. The backyard was quiet, the stars scattered across the night sky like shattered glass. I wrapped my arms around myself, the cool breeze brushing against my skin. Out here, away from the house and its secrets, I felt a flicker of clarity. This wasn't just about David. This was about me. For years, I built my life around him, around our family, our routines, our future. I'd convinced myself we were solid, unshakable. But now, with one text, the foundation I thought was indestructible felt like it was crumbling beneath me. I sat on the porch swing, the chains creaking softly with my movements. My phone buzzed in my pocket, startling me. For a brief, absurd moment, I wondered if it was her, the woman who'd sent the message. Instead, it was a text from my best friend, Claire. "Hey, just checking in. You okay?" Claire had an uncanny knack for sensing when something was wrong. I stared at the screen, debating whether to tell her. I could already imagine her reaction. Anger on my behalf, 1,000 questions, maybe even an offer to drive over and help me confront him. But I wasn't ready for that, either. "I'm fine," I typed back. "Just tired. We'll catch up soon." Her reply came almost instantly. "Okay, but if you need me, I'm here. Always." I slipped my phone back into my pocket, her words lingering in my mind. I wasn't ready to bring anyone else into this. Not yet. First, I needed answers. When I finally went back inside, the house was dark and quiet. The kids were asleep, their bedroom doors closed, and the faint glow of the TV spilled from under the door of our bedroom. David always fell asleep with it on, a habit I used to find endearing. Now it irritated me. I peeked inside. He was sprawled across the bed, remote still in hand, his chest rising and falling in slow, even breaths. The sight of him, so at peace, so unaware of the storm raging inside me, made my stomach churn. Quietly, I slipped into the room and picked up his phone from the nightstand. My heart pounded as I unlocked it. He'd never changed the passcode, a detail that felt almost insulting now. The messages were still there, as vivid and damning as before. I scrolled up, reading every line, every emoji, every stolen promise. Her name was Erica, and from the timestamps, this wasn't some fleeting affair. It had been going on for months. My hands clenched around the phone, my vision blurring with unshed tears. I wanted to throw the phone at the wall, to wake him up and demand he explain himself, but I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I took a deep breath and put the phone back where I'd found it. The confrontation would come, but not tonight. I needed time to think, to plan, to figure out what came next. As I lay down beside him, the bed felt colder than ever. His breathing was steady, his presence solid and familiar. But the distance between us was a chasm I wasn't sure we could ever bridge. I stared at the ceiling, the darkness pressing down on me, and made a silent vow. I wouldn't let this break me. I didn't know what the next days would bring, but one thing was clear. I deserved the truth, and I would get it no matter what it took. The next morning, I woke to the sound of David moving around the room, his movements careful not to disturb me. He always left for work early, but today, the sight of him pulling on his shirt and tying his tie felt different. I lay still, feigning sleep, watching him from beneath my lashes. "See you tonight," he whispered, leaning down to press a kiss to my forehead. I resisted the urge to flinch. As soon as I heard the door close, I sat up. The bed felt emptier than ever, and the silence of the house pressed in on me. My chest was heavy with the weight of the secret I carried. I wasn't sure how long I could keep it to myself. I went to the kitchen, poured a cup of coffee, and stared out the window at the backyard. It looked so serene, the sunlight filtering through the trees, casting playful shadows on the grass. But inside me, everything was chaos. I had to do something. Sitting and waiting wasn't an option anymore. My first instinct was to check his phone again, but he'd taken it with him, of course. Instead, I turned to his laptop. It sat on the dining table, where he often worked late into the night. The screen was dark, the surface smudged with fingerprints. I opened it, and my heart pounded as I typed in the password. It was a long shot, but I knew David well. He wasn't the type to overcomplicate things. I started with the obvious, our wedding anniversary. The screen blinked to life. A rush of adrenaline surged through me, but it was quickly tempered by dread. This was it, the door to his world, wide open. I navigated to his emails first, my fingers trembling as I scrolled through them. At first, it was all work-related, meeting reminders and reports, but then, buried between a subscription renewal and a sales receipt, I found it. An email from Erica. The subject line read, "Miss you already?" I clicked it, my breath catching in my throat. The message was short, but devastating. "Last night was amazing. I don't know how much longer I can stand being apart, counting the hours until I see you again." Attached was a photo, a selfie of her in a dimly lit room wearing nothing but a sheet. I slammed the laptop shut, the image seared into my mind. My hands clenched into fists, my nails digging into my palms. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to cry, but I didn't. Instead, I picked up my phone and dialed the one person I could trust to help me navigate this nightmare. "Claire," I said when she answered, "I need you." It took her less than 20 minutes to get to my house. She burst through the door, her face a mix of concern and determination. "What's going on?" she asked, dropping her bag on the counter. I handed her a cup of coffee and sat down at the table, the words spilling out of me in a rush. The text, the email, the photo, everything. She listened without interrupting, her expression growing darker with each detail. "That son of a bitch," she finally said, her voice low and dangerous. "I don't know what to do," I admitted. "Do I confront him? Do I wait? Do I?" "First you breathe," she interrupted, placing a steadying hand on mine. "And then we figure this out together." We spent the rest of the morning piecing together the fragments of evidence I'd gathered. Claire had always been the pragmatic one, and her calm demeanor was a lifeline. "Let's start with the basics," she said. "What do we know about Erica?" "Nothing," I admitted. "Just her name and her face." Claire frowned. "That's enough for now. Let's see if we can find more." She pulled out her laptop, and within minutes we were diving into the rabbit hole of social media. It didn't take long to find her. A woman with bright red hair, an infectious smile, and a perfectly curated Instagram profile. Her life was on full display. Beach vacations, fancy dinners, and a suspiciously high number of photos from the same hotels David had mentioned on his business trips. "There," Claire said, pointing to a post. "That's the hotel he stayed at last month, isn't it?" I nodded, my stomach churning. "She's bold," Claire muttered, "posting all this out in the open like she has nothing to lose." I didn't say anything. My eyes were fixed on the screen, on the life she had flaunted, a life that had stolen pieces of mine. As we scrolled further, I noticed something, a photo of her with another man, her arm draped around his shoulders. "Wait," I said, leaning closer. "Who's that?" Claire clicked on his profile, and as it loaded, I felt the first flicker of hope. He was tagged in several of her photos, his captions hinting at a romantic relationship. "She's not just seeing David," Claire said, her tone triumphant. "She's playing him." The revelation was a small victory, but it didn't erase the pain. If anything, it added another layer to the betrayal. As Claire closed the laptop, she looked at me with a determined expression. "This isn't over. We're just getting started." I nodded, the fire in her eyes sparking something in me. For the first time since the text message, I felt a glimmer of strength. I wasn't alone in this, and I wasn't going to let it destroy me. The confrontation I imagined in my mind was fiery, a clash of words and emotions where I could finally unleash the storm that had been brewing in my chest. But that wasn't what happened. Instead, I found myself in the parking lot of a cafe, my heart pounding as I stared at Erica's Instagram photo one more time for courage. Claire had convinced me this was the next step. She'd helped me craft a message pretending to be someone interested in business opportunities, using the boutique shop Erica owned as bait. To my surprise, Erica had replied quickly, eager to meet. Now, as I sat in my car, the cafe just a few steps away, I second-guessed everything. What was I even hoping to gain from this? Answers? Closure? Or just a chance to look her in the eyes and see the woman who had stolen so much from me? My phone buzzed. A message from Claire, "You've got this. Text me when it's done." I inhaled deeply, tucked my phone into my purse, and stepped out of the car. The cafe was warm and inviting, filled with the hum of chatter and the aroma of fresh coffee. I spotted Erica almost immediately. She looked just like her photos. Bright red hair cascading over her shoulders, sharp cheekbones, and a confident air about her. She sat by the window, scrolling on her phone, completely unaware of the storm about to walk in. I adjusted my scarf, squared my shoulders, and approached her. "Erica." She looked up, her face lighting up with a practiced smile. "Yes, hi. You must be—" "Not who you think," I interrupted, sliding into the seat across from her. Her smile faltered, confusion flickering across her features. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" "You don't," I said, keeping my voice calm, though my hands clenched tightly under the table. "But I know you, and I know about you and David." The blood drained from her face. For a moment, she just stared at me, her lips parting as if to say something, then closing again. She began, but I held up a hand. "Don't bother denying it. I've seen the messages. The photos. I know everything." She swallowed hard, her composure cracking. "Look, I didn't know he was married at first, okay?" He said things were complicated." I scoffed, the words bitter on my tongue. "Complicated? That's a hell of a way to describe a 15-year marriage and 2 kids. Her eyes darted around the cafe, as if searching for an escape, but there was none. "Not from this." "I didn't mean to hurt anyone," she said finally, her voice softer now, almost pleading. "Didn't mean to?" I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a whisper. "You sent him a message at dinner." "Dinner? With his family?" Her face flushed, and she bit her lip. For a moment, I thought she might cry, but then her expression shifted, anger flickering in her eyes. "You think I'm the bad guy here," she snapped. "I'm not the one who lied to you. I'm not the one who made promises I couldn't keep. That's on him." Her words hit like a slap, not because they weren't true, but because they were. I leaned back in my seat, the fight draining out of me. "How long?" I asked quietly. "How long has this been going on?" She hesitated, then sighed. "Almost a year." A year. The word echoed in my mind, hollow and devastating. A year of lies, of betrayal, of pretending everything was fine. "Did you love him?" I asked before I could stop myself. She looked surprised by the question, then shook her head. "I don't know. Maybe. It felt real sometimes," but she trailed off, her gaze dropping to the table. "But what?" She hesitated, then met my eyes. I'm not the only one. The world seemed to tilt, the air rushing out of my lungs. What? She nodded slowly. There are others. I've seen the way he talks to them, the messages. I thought I was special, but I wasn't. I sat there, stunned, the weight of her words pressing down on me. This wasn't just one affair. This was a pattern, a web of lies so tangled I didn't know where it began or ended. Erica shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Look, I didn't come here to hurt you. I'm sorry. For what it's worth, I ended it weeks ago. Her words felt empty, like an afterthought. I didn't know whether to believe her, and at this point, it didn't matter. I stood, the chair scraping against the floor. Thank you for your honesty, I said, though the words tasted bitter. She opened her mouth to say something, but I didn't wait to hear it. I walked out of the cafe, the cool air hitting my face like a slap. My phone buzzed again, Claire checking in, but I couldn't respond. Not yet. As I sat in my car, staring blankly at the dashboard, one thought consumed me. This wasn't just about David. This was about me, about what I would do next, because this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I spent the rest of the day in a daze. The weight of Erica's words clung to me like a fog, suffocating and unrelenting. It wasn't just her. That thought looped in my mind, each repetition sharper than the last. By the time David came home, I'd already plastered on the mask I perfected over the years, the one that said everything was fine, even when it wasn't. He kissed me on the cheek, the gesture automatic, and headed upstairs to change. I watched him go, the sight of his retreating back sparking a strange mixture of fury and sadness. For so long, I believed in him, trusted him. And now, every glance, every touch felt like a lie. After dinner, while he was in the shower, I went back to his laptop. The earlier invasion had felt wrong, but now it felt necessary. Erica's revelation had cracked something open, and I needed to know how deep the betrayal went. I navigated to his email again, this time searching for more names, more threads in this web of lies. It didn't take long to find them. Messages sent late at night, their tone playful, flirty, unmistakably intimate. One name in particular stood out, Julia. Her messages were different, less overtly sexual, more emotional. She talked about missing him, about how safe he made her feel. Safe. The irony was almost laughable. But then, buried among their exchanges, I found something that stopped me cold. A flight confirmation. The dates matched the weekend. He was supposed to be at a work conference. My stomach churned as I read the itinerary, 2 tickets, 1 hotel room. I felt sick. This wasn't just casual infidelity. This was calculated, premeditated. I closed the laptop, my hands trembling. For a moment, I just sat there, the darkness of the room pressing in around me. I wanted to scream, to cry, to throw something, but instead, I took a deep breath and stood. I needed air. The backyard was quiet, the cool night air biting against my skin. I sat on the porch steps, staring out at the darkness, my mind racing. How had we gotten here? What had I missed? And why? Why hadn't I seen this coming? I thought back to the early days of our marriage, when we'd been so in sync it felt like we could read each other's minds. The way he used to look at me, like I was the only thing that mattered. When had that changed? Or had it? The thought struck me like a slap. Had I been so wrapped up in my own life, in the kids and the routines, that I hadn't noticed him slipping away? The sound of the patio door, sliding open, pulled me from my thoughts. I turned to see Claire stepping out, her expression equal parts concern and determination. I knocked, she said, holding up a bottle of wine. But you didn't answer. So I let myself in. I managed a weak smile. You're a terrible guest, you know that? She grinned, settling beside me and pouring us each a glass. And yet, here I am. For a while, we just sat there in silence, the wine warming me from the inside out. Finally, I told her what I'd found about Julia, the emails, the plane tickets. Her jaw tightened as I spoke, her knuckles whitening around her glass. "He's not just a liar," she said when I finished. "He's a coward." I nodded, the word ringing painfully true. "What are you going to do?" she asked, her voice softer now. "I don't know," I admitted. Part of me wants to confront him, to lay it all out and demand answers. But the other part, I'm scared, Claire. What if I don't like what I hear? She reached over, squeezing my hand. "You deserve the truth, no matter how ugly it is." Her words lingered long after she'd left, echoing in my mind as I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling. The truth. That's what I wanted, wasn't it? But the more I uncovered, the more I realized that the truth wasn't just about him. It was about me, about what I was willing to accept and what I wasn't. And as I drifted off to sleep, one thought stood out above the rest. This wasn't over. Not yet. The next morning, I woke with a clarity I hadn't felt in days. It wasn't peace, far from it, but it was a sense of purpose, a faint thread of determination pulling me forward. I couldn't keep living like this, caught between the lies and my fear of confronting them. David left early again, kissing me lightly on the cheek before slipping out the door. It felt rehearsed, mechanical, like an actor going through the motions. I watched him drive away, the familiar hum of his car fading into the distance. I had to do something. But what? I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen table, staring blankly at the steam curling from the mug. Confronting him outright felt reckless. I needed more than just my anger. I needed to be sure, to understand the full scope of what I was dealing with. I picked up my phone and called Claire. "I've been waiting for this," she said without preamble. "What's the plan?" I smiled despite myself. "I don't know yet. That's why I need you." Within an hour, she was at my house, armed with her laptop and a determined expression. "Okay," she said, sitting across from me at the table. "We need to figure out what you want out of this. Do you want revenge? Closure? A clean break?" "I want the truth," I said, the words spilling out before I could think about them. "I want to know who he really is, and what else he's been hiding." Claire nodded. "Then we start there." We spent the next several hours piecing together the fragments of David's double life, his emails, his credit card statements, even his social media accounts. All of it painted a picture that was both shocking and heartbreakingly familiar. There were more women, just as Erica had said. Their names blurred together after a while, each one a piece of a puzzle I didn't want to solve. But it wasn't just the affairs. There were other secrets, too, financial decisions he'd made without telling me, trips he'd taken that had nothing to do with work, late-night purchases that hinted at a life I'd never been part of. By the time we were done, I felt like I didn't even know the man I'd married. "Now what?" Claire asked, closing her laptop. I stared out the window, the weight of everything settling over me. "Now, I take back control." Claire raised an eyebrow. "What does that mean?" "It means I'm done playing by his rules," I said, the words surprising even me. "I'm going to confront him, but on my terms. And I'm going to make sure I have the upper hand." Claire smiled, a flicker of pride in her eyes. "That's the spirit." For the next few days, I prepared. I gathered evidence, documented everything I could find, and even consulted a lawyer. Discreetly, of course. I needed to know my rights, what I could expect if this spiraled into something bigger. Through it all, I kept up the facade. I laughed at David's jokes, kissed him goodnight, and played the role of the oblivious wife. But inside, I was simmering, waiting for the right moment to strike. And then, finally, it came. One evening, as we sat in the living room, the kids upstairs, I turned to him and said, "David, we need to talk." He looked up from his phone, his expression wary. "What's wrong?" I took a deep breath, steadying myself. I know about Erica and Julia and the others. The color drained from his face. For a moment, he just stared at me, his mouth opening and closing like he was trying to find the right words. What are you talking about? He stammered. I held up my phone, the messages and photos glaring back at him. Don't insult me by pretending you don't know. He leaned back, running a hand through his hair. Look, I can explain. No, I interrupted, my voice sharp. You don't get to explain. You don't get to twist this around or make excuses. I've spent the past few weeks uncovering the truth, and now I'm giving you a choice. You can tell me everything, all of it, or I can walk away right now. His eyes widened, the panic evident. You don't mean that. Try me, I said, my tone icy. For a long moment he said nothing, and then, slowly, he nodded. Okay, he said quietly. I'll tell you everything. I leaned back, my heart pounding. This was it, the moment I'd been waiting for. The moment I would finally learn who my husband really was. But as he began to speak, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The air between us felt heavy, charged with the weight of what was about to happen. David sat across from me, his hands clasped tightly in his lap, his eyes darting around the room, as though looking for an escape. For once, I didn't fill the silence. I let it stretch, watching as it worked on him, cracking his composure bit by bit. Okay, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Where do you want me to start? I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees, my gaze steady. Start with Erica. And then, you don't stop until you've told me everything. He swallowed hard, nodding. I met her at a conference last year. She was easy to talk to, you know? At first, it was just friendly, work stuff, casual conversations. But then, it turned into something else. I clenched my fists, my nails biting into my palms. Something else, I repeated, my tone flat. You mean sneaking around behind my back? He flinched. It wasn't like that at first. I didn't plan for it to happen. It got out of hand. Out of hand, I echoed, my voice rising. You don't accidentally carry on an affair for a year, David. And Erica wasn't the only one, was she? He hesitated, and for a moment I thought he might try to deny it. But then he shook his head, his shoulders slumping. No, she wasn't. The admission felt like a slap, even though I'd already known the truth. Hearing him say it, though, hearing the words come from his own mouth, was something else entirely. How many? I asked, my voice cold and steady. He looked away, shame coloring his features. 3, he said finally. Maybe 4. I lost count. The room spun, the walls closing in around me. You lost count, I said, my voice trembling with disbelief. Are you serious right now? I know how it sounds, he said quickly, but it wasn't about you. It was never about you. I laughed bitterly, the sound sharp and hollow. That's supposed to make me feel better? That it wasn't about me? You lied to me, to our kids. You destroyed everything we built together. And now you want me to believe it wasn't personal? I'm sorry, he said, his voice breaking. I know I messed up. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But you're right, I interrupted, my voice cutting through his. You don't. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the ticking of the clock on the wall, each second dragging out longer than the last. I don't know why I did it, he said finally, his voice quiet and raw. Maybe I was trying to fill some void. Or maybe I was just selfish. But I never stopped loving you. I need you to believe that. I stared at him, his words washing over me like a tide. I couldn't stop. Love. The word felt hollow now, stripped of its meaning. You don't do this to someone you love, I said, my voice trembling with anger. You don't lie to them, betray them, make them question everything they thought was real. He opened his mouth to respond, but I held up a hand. No, I'm done listening to your excuses. I've spent weeks drowning in this mess, trying to figure out what went wrong, what I did to deserve this. But the truth is, this isn't about me. This is about you. Your choices. Your mistakes. Tears welled in his eyes, and for a brief moment, I saw the man I'd fallen in love with. The man who used to make me laugh until my stomach hurt, who held my hand when I was scared, who kissed me like I was the only thing that mattered. But that man was gone now, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. I need time, I said finally, my voice quiet but firm. Time to figure out what I want, what I need. And until then, I think it's best if you stay somewhere else. He nodded slowly, his shoulders sagging with defeat. Okay, he said, if that's what you want. It's not what I want, I said, my voice breaking. But it's what I need. As he stood and walked toward the door, I felt a strange mix of emotions, anger, sadness, relief. This wasn't the end, not yet, but it was the beginning of something new. And for the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope. The house was quiet after David left. Too quiet. The kind of silence that pressed against my ears, making me hyper-aware of every creak, every sigh of the wind against the windows. His absence, though necessary, left a gaping hole in the rhythm of the home. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the glass of water in front of me. The storm of the past few weeks had passed, but the wreckage remained. I thought I'd feel relief when I told him to leave, but what settled over me instead was an unfamiliar stillness. For years, my life had been built around him. Around us. Every decision, every compromise, every dream tied to the promise we'd made to each other. And now, that promise was gone, shattered into pieces I couldn't begin to put back together. I stood and wandered into the living room. Photos of our family lined the shelves, vacations, birthdays, moments frozen in time. I picked one up, a picture of us on our honeymoon, standing on a beach, arms wrapped around each other. We looked so happy, so sure of the future. I put the photo face down. The kids came home later, their chatter filling the space with a warmth I hadn't realized I'd been missing. I kept the details vague when they asked about their father, just said he needed time to work through some things. They didn't press, but I could see the questions in their eyes. After they went to bed, I pulled out a notebook. I didn't know what I was planning to write, only that the words felt trapped inside me, begging to be set free. At first, it was just a list, a messy, cathartic stream of everything I was feeling, anger, betrayal, sadness. But as I wrote, the words began to shift. I started writing a letter, not to David, but to myself. Dear me, I'm sorry I let you forget how strong you are. I'm sorry I let you believe that your worth was tied to someone else's choices. You deserve better. You deserve love, honesty, respect. And if you have to fight for those things alone, so be it, because you're worth the fight. The tears came then, hot and uncontrollable, but they weren't the same tears I'd cried before. These weren't tears of helplessness. They were something else, something lighter, something cleansing. When the letter was finished, I folded it neatly and tucked it into my drawer. It wasn't for anyone else to see. It was mine, a promise to myself. The days that followed were strange and uneven. Some mornings, I woke up with a sense of purpose, ready to face whatever came next. Other days, I felt like a ghost, moving through the motions without really being present. Claire was my rock through it all. She checked in daily, dragging me out for coffee, or a walk when she sensed I needed it. You're stronger than you think, she told me one afternoon, her arm looped through mine as we strolled through the park. I don't feel strong, I admitted. Strength doesn't mean not breaking, she said. It means picking up the pieces after you do. Her words stayed with me. A week later, David called. His voice was hesitant, unsure. Can we talk? He asked. I agreed, though my heart raced at the thought of seeing him again. We met at a cafe, neutral ground. He looked tired, older somehow, like the weight of his actions had finally caught up to him. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," he said, his hands wrapped around his coffee cup. "About what I did. About us. I know I can't fix this, but I want to try. If you'll let me." I studied him, searching for sincerity, and I saw it there, buried beneath the guilt and regret. But it wasn't enough, not yet. "I'm glad you're reflecting," I said carefully. "But this isn't something you can just patch up with words. Trust isn't something you earn back overnight." He nodded, his eyes filled with a sadness I didn't know how to interpret. "I'll do whatever it takes," he said. "I need time," I said simply, "and you do too, to figure out who you are, what you want. Because right now, I don't think either of us knows." He didn't argue. He just nodded, and for the first time, I felt a flicker of understanding pass between us. When I left the cafe, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. What I felt was free. Free to rebuild. Free to redefine myself, not as someone's wife or someone's victim, but as me. That night, I tucked the kids in and stood at the window, staring out at the stars. The sky felt vast, infinite, and for the first time in a long time, so did the possibilities ahead of me. I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know if David and I would ever find our way back to each other, or if the path we were on would lead us in different directions. But I did know one thing. I wasn't afraid anymore. And that, I realized, was the most powerful feeling of all. Thank you for taking the time to watch this story. I hope it resonated with you, or at least made you think. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What would you have done in this situation? What do you think about the choices the characters made? Please share your perspective in the comments below. It really helps the channel grow and create even better content. I also want to apologize for any mistakes you might have noticed in the text or pronunciation. Some parts of this video were dubbed using artificial intelligence, as I'm still learning English and improving every day. If you caught any errors, I'd truly appreciate it if you could point them out in the comments. Your feedback helps me grow, and I'm grateful for your understanding. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.